Hi students, in this video I am going to talk about management. In your syllabus there is a topic on history of management thoughts. So let me begin with this. Management as a separate field of study is said to have emerged during the second half of the 19th century only. The evolution of management thoughts can be broken down into three phases. Uh, Number one, early classical approach. The phase of early classical approach, and this particular uh, approach, or the phase in which the development of early classical approaches happened, can be further broken down into classical scientific management approach and classical administrative management approach. Then the second phase uh, consisted of uh, the management approach called neoclassical approach, where it primarily looked at behavioral management theory, or in which period the behavioral management theory, development of behavioral management theory actually happened. And the, in the third phase came the modern approach, in which uh, approaches like quantitative approach, system approach, and contingency approaches to management were developed. Now, to go into the details of each, maybe briefly, first to begin with the early classical approach, and in particular the classical scientific management approach. This actually classical scientific management approach or theory or concept actually arose because of the need to increase productivity and efficiency. Businesses that time were expanding and capital was readily available, but labor was in short supply, and therefore managers began to search ways to use existing labor more efficiently. And because of that, the primary focus was on ways to improve the performance of individual workers. And the major contributors to this classical scientific school of thoughts were Frederick Winslow Taylor, Henry L. Gantt, and Frank and Lillian Gilbreth. Now, in your syllabus, there is also topics like contributors uh, to uh, management, and some names were mentioned like the Frederick Winslow Taylor, then Henry Fayol, and then uh, there were also names of people like Elton Mayo. So in your syllabus this is included, so I had to talk about that, the contributions made by these management experts. So F.W. Taylor or Frederick Winslow Taylor was a chief engineer that time, and he believed that organizations should study tasks and develop precise procedures. And he started designing the shovels for the workers to use. And from the redesign of the shovels, that increased the length of the time people can work, and the number of people required for shoveling was reduced from 500 people to 140 people. F.W. Taylor is also considered the father of scientific management. He also actually developed an incentive system that paid uh, workers more money for meeting new standards. So those were some of his contributions. Now to go into a brief description about classical administrative management, which falls under the early classical approach. In case of scientific management, focus was on the productivity of individuals, whereas the administrative approach concentrated on the total organization. Administrative management actually focused on the total organization and on ways to make it more efficient, the organization as a whole, not the efficiency of the people. The emphasis was on the development of managerial principles rather than work methods. The emphasis of classical scientific management was on the development of work methods rather than managerial principles. And the major contributors to this school of thought were Henry Fayol, Max Weber, Lyndall Urwick, and Chester I. Barnard. Classical administrative management also studied the flow of information within an organization and emphasized the importance of understanding how organization as a whole operated. So from this you can understand that the main focus of administrative management was on the organization as a whole, how to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the organization as a whole, and not the efficiency and effectiveness of individual workers. So in that period, uh, management experts like Max Weber actually developed the concept of bureaucratic organizations, which still exist. Then, uh, why I have to talk about this Henry Fayol is again in your syllabus. Contribution made by Henry Fayol is there, so I have included here. So Henry Fayol's the contribution of Henry Fayol was identification of specific managerial functions like planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. In addition to that, he came up with actually 14 principles for effective management of an organization. But we will not go into the details of the 14 principles. So those were his contribution. Then moving on to the neoclassical approach. Neoclassical approach actually looked at the behavioral management theory, or it focused on the development of behavioral management theory. So early advocates of classical management viewed organizations and jobs from essentially mechanistic point of view. And if you remember, in the scientific approach, the main focus was to improve the efficiency of worker and the development of incentive pay were also focused on who actually surpassed the standards. So the uh, scientific management actually focused on the improvement of organization as a whole and individual people, and their view was very mechanistic in nature, and they looked at how to improve the physical efficiency of people. And in short, their focus was on how managers could actually control and standardize the behavior of employee. And from if you look from other point of view, classical theory actually ignored employees' motivation or inner feelings, attitudes, and their behavior. Actually, they did not look at how managers can improve the efficiency of both individual workers and organization by looking at the aspects of employee motivation or inner feelings or attitudes or their behavior. So the behavioral management theory actually looked at that. And when this neoclassical approaches started, the management experts actually started placing more emphasis on individual attitudes and behaviors and group processes, and recognize the importance of behavioral processes in the workplace. The behavioral management theory is often called human relations movement because it addressed the human dimension of work. Abraham Maslow, for example, a practicing psychologist that time during the period of neoclassical approach, advanced a theory suggesting that people are motivated by hierarchy of need, including monetary incentives and social acceptance. And he actually came up with the theory of hierarchy of need and motivational techniques. Now to move on further, again in your syllabus there is a topic on contribution of Elton Mayo, so that is why it is included here. So the main contribution of Elton Mayo with his associates was what is called Hawthorne studies. So in this study, he, he and his associates actually studied the impact of illumination on the productivity, and they found that when illumination was increased for experimental group, productivity went up for both the experimental group and the other group which were not subjected to experiments of increase or decrease in the illumination. Then another approach that was developed in the neuroclassical approach uh, phase was human relations approach, which actually grew from the Hawthorne studies and was very popular that time, and it was popular for many years. So in the era of neoclassical approaches, management experts started realizing that workers respond primarily to the social context of the workplace, including social conditioning, group norms, and interpersonal dynamics. That means in the era of neoclassical approaches, the management experts started realizing the importance of social context of the workplaces or the behavioral aspects or human relation aspects in the improvement of organizations efficiency and effectiveness. Now to move on to modern approaches. Modern approaches are further broken down into quantitative approach, system approach, and contingency approach. And to look briefly on each of them, quantitative approach used mathematical models to manage organizations. So in this case, a mixed group of specialists from relevant discipline were made to analyze problem and propose course of action to the management. The team then constructed a mathematical model to simulate the problem, taking into consideration all the factors and interrelationships of those factors in the management. Then the team eventually provided the management with a rational base for making a decision after they actually finished after they got a result from the simulation of a mathematical model. In case of system approach, the managers viewed an organization as a system of interrelated set of elements functioning as a whole. So in this case, an organization was looked at as a system consisting of inputs, transformation processes, outputs, and feedback. In the in the contingency approach, the management experts started realizing that universal theories cannot be applied to organizations at all times in every situation, because each organization is unique and every time the internal and external environment keep changing. The classical behavioral and quantitative approaches are all considered universal perspectives because they try to identify one best way to manage organizations. But contingency approach did not believe in universal perspective, and they believed that the best way to manage an organization will depend upon many conditions and situations. So the contingency school of management was sometimes summarized as "it all depends" approach. And according to this contingency approach, management principles and concepts of various schools have no general and universal applicability under all conditions. And in other words, what contingency approach believed was that there is no one best way of doing things or managing an organization under all conditions. Accordingly, contingency approach suggested that a manager will have to figure out which technique will, in a particular situation, best contribute to the attainment of management goals. So, from the point of view of this approach, managers will have to develop a sort of situational sensitivity and practical selectivity. Now, that is all about the history of management. Moving on to the strategic management. In order to understand what strategic management is, first we need to understand the word strategy, what strategy means. So a strategy is a comprehensive plan for accomplishing an organization's goal. A comprehensive plan for accomplishing an organization's goal. And the strategic management is a comprehensive and ongoing management process aimed at formulating and implementing effective strategies. Now, what is effective strategies? Effective strategies are those strategies that promote a superior alignment between the organization and its environment and the achievement of strategic goals. That is what is called effective strategies. So, strategic management is all about comprehensive and ongoing management process aimed at formulating and implementing effective strategies. And effective strategies are those that promote superior alignment between the organization and its environment and the achievement of strategic goals. So, if strategies were to be effective, then it must bring about a superior alignment amongst three elements here, like for example, organization, environment, and strategic goal. So, if you can actually devise such a strategy which will actually align the organization with the organization in the best possible manner and achieve the strategic goals set for the organization, then it becomes effective strategies. And to look at the general steps of strategic management, first and foremost, an organization will have to define its vision and mission. So, vision refers to a future state of an organization, and mission refers to organization's fundamental purpose. So, the first step for strategic management is to define vision and understand its fundamental purpose. With a proper understanding of the fundamental purpose of the organization, the mission, the organization will have to first define the vision, which is the future state of the organization, where the organization would like to go, or in what state will the organization be after 5 to 10 years. Then after defining the vision with a clear understanding of the mission or the fundamental purpose of the organization, then the analysis of the organization's environment and the organization itself will have to start. And from that analysis of the environment and the organization itself, then the organization will have to formulate strategies to align the organization in best possible way to the external environment to actually support the mission of the organization and achieve the vision in the long run. So in order to do that, there are tools like SWOT analysis, pestle analysis, Porter's 5 forces, which can be used to perform the analysis of the environment or organization. In fact, SWOT analysis is used to analyze the organization, and pestle analysis is used to understand the environment. And Porter's 5 forces is used to find out how attractive a market is for an organization. So in SWOT analysis, SWOT actually refers, the full form of SWOT is strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat analysis. So through SWOT analysis, what you do is identify strengths and weaknesses of an organization, find out what are the strengths and weaknesses of the organization, and try to also identify what opportunities lies in the environment and what are the threats in the environment. Then through this analysis, it can help in developing effective strategies, the effective strategies that you saw in this slide. Then after that, perform what is called pestle analysis in order to identify and understand the macroeconomic forces that may impact on the organization. So pestle actually refers to political, P refers to political, E refers to economic, S refers to social, T refers to technological, L refers to legal, and E refers to environmental forces. So use pestle analysis to analyze the environment, not only to understand the macroeconomic forces, but also to understand the legal, the technological and environmental forces that will actually affect the organization in its day-to-day operation and year-to-year operation and achievement of long-term goals. Then you can also perform what is called, you can also use Porter's five forces to study the attractiveness of the endeavor which an organization is trying to uh, focus on. So in this case, the five forces defined by Porter are potential entrants, potential substitutes, power of supplier, power of buyers, and competitive rivalry. So when you actually study the environment, you can also see uh, if there are any potential entrants or entries to or barriers to entry into certain business area. So with the help of this, by studying the potential entrants, you can actually determine uh, the level of entry barrier. How high or how strong is the entry barrier? So higher the entry barrier or stronger the entry barriers, better the or attract more attractive a market will be. Then the organization can also find out if there is any chance of possible substitutes for the product or services that an organization is actually planning to embark on in the long run, 5 to 10 years down the line. So if you have an idea of coming up with a product which has less potential substitutes, then the market for that organization becomes more attractive. And you can also, and the organization also can study the bargaining power of supplier and bargaining power of buyers. So stronger the power, bargaining power of suppliers, less attractive will be a market. Similarly, stronger the bargaining power of buyers, less attractive will be the market. So all such things an organization can study and then come up with effective strategies. So organization can also study the competitive rivalry, and in order to enter into a market, organizations will also have to find out whether there are competitive rivalries already existing in the market, or and check who are the key rivals in the market if the organization plans to enter into a particular market. So by actually studying all these through using these tools and by studying all these elements or factors, an organization can come up with effective strategies, and strategic management will become then effective. Okay, so with this I will stop here. Thank you.